The walls were shaking, cannons never stopped firing, smoke covered the entire fortress. Thousands of Ottoman soldiers were already climbing the walls. Inside, only around 700 knights remained. No reinforcements, no escape, no surrender. Everyone believed they would be dead before sunrise, but the Ottomans had no idea who they were fighting. For days, the bombardment never stopped. Massive cannonballs smashed into the ancient walls, stone cracked, towers crumbled. Every explosion shook the fortress beneath the defenders' feet. Food was running low, ammunition was becoming scarce. Every passing hour brought another assault, yet the knights refused to abandon their positions. They had already made their choice: fight or die. Every man understood that retreat was impossible. If the fortress fell, nothing would stand between the Ottoman army and its objective. Then, the Ottoman commander gave the order everyone had been expecting. One final assault. Thousands of soldiers surged towards the walls. Ladders slammed against the stone. War cries echoed across the battlefield. Drums thundered. Arrows darkened the sky. The greatest attack of the siege had begun. The defenders answered with everything they had. Arrows flew from the walls. Spears struck the climbers below. Stones crashed onto the attackers. Every section of the fortress became a desperate battlefield. Men fought hand to hand above the shattered walls. Then, something unbelievable happened. The attack began to slow. The Ottoman soldiers started falling back, not because they lacked numbers, not because they lacked courage, but because around 700 determined knights refused to break. Again and again, the attackers climbed the walls. Again and again, they were thrown back. Every meter of ground was paid for in blood. Nobody could understand it. How could only 700 men hold back one of the most powerful armies in the world? How could such a tiny force continue fighting after days of constant bombardment? The answer would soon become one of the greatest stories of courage in military history. What happened next transformed this siege into one of history's most legendary last stands. The next morning, the bombardment continued without pause, hour after hour. Another section of the walls was struck by Ottoman cannon fire. Massive stones crashed into the fortress. Dust filled the air. Smoke drifted across the city. Every explosion shook the ground beneath the defenders' feet, but no one abandoned their position. Every knight understood what was at stake. If Rhodes fell, the eastern Mediterranean would be left exposed, and the Ottoman Empire would gain control of one of the most important strongholds in the region. Outside the walls, Sultan Suleiman's enormous army waited patiently. Tens of thousands of soldiers filled the camps surrounding the city. Hundreds of cannons stood ready. Engineers prepared new siege works. Archers and elite janissaries waited for the next assault. Almost everyone believed Rhodes would fall within days, but they had badly underestimated the determination of the defenders. Inside the fortress, every single person had a role to play. Some men rebuilt damaged walls before the next bombardment began. Others carried arrows, gunpowder, and food to the front lines. Guards stood watch through the night, searching for any sign of another attack. Sleep became a luxury. No one rested for long, because every sunrise and every sunset could bring another assault. Then, the Ottomans changed their strategy. Instead of attacking only from above, they decided to attack from below. Their engineers began digging tunnels beneath the fortress. If they could reach the foundations of the walls, they could destroy them with explosives and create a massive breach. It was a dangerous plan, but if it succeeded, the siege could be over in a single day. Then, the ground suddenly exploded. A deafening blast echoed across the battlefield. A huge section of the wall collapsed into a cloud of smoke and shattered stone. Before the dust had even settled, Ottoman soldiers rushed towards the opening. Thousands of warriors poured through the breach, hoping to overwhelm the defenders before they could recover. The biggest assault of the entire siege had begun. Inside the fortress, chaos erupted. Smoke made it difficult to see. Wounded men cried out for help. Officers shouted orders above the roar of battle. No one knew if the defenders could hold the breach, because if the Ottomans captured it, Rhodes would fall, and the battle would be over. Then, the defenders made a decision that stunned everyone. Instead of retreating deeper into the city, they charged straight towards the breach, shoulder to shoulder, swords and spears in hand. They met the attackers head-on, and what happened next shocked the entire Ottoman army. The defenders charged straight into the breach. There was no hesitation, no fear, only determination. Swords clashed against steel, spears splintered under the force of the fighting, smoke and dust covered everything. The air was filled with shouting, cannon fire, and the cries of wounded men. Nobody could see more than a few steps ahead. The battle for Rhodes had reached its final and most desperate stage. The Janissaries kept coming, wave after wave. They were among the finest soldiers in the Ottoman Empire, highly trained, disciplined, fearless. Every assault looked powerful enough to overwhelm the defenders, but every single time, the knights fought them back. The walls had been shattered by months of bombardment. Towers had collapsed. Entire sections of the fortress lay in ruins. Yet one thing refused to break: the spirit of the defenders. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. Still, the siege refused to end. The Ottomans had more soldiers, more cannons, more ammunition, more supplies. They could replace their losses. The defenders could not, but every step forward cost the Ottoman army dearly. Every breach became another bloody battlefield. Even Sultan Suleiman began to realize that Rhodes would not fall as easily as he had expected. Inside the city, however, the situation had become desperate. Food supplies were almost gone. Clean water was becoming scarce. Many defenders were wounded. Others were too exhausted to stand for long. They had survived every assault the Ottomans had launched against them, but they knew they could not survive forever. The Grand Master now faced the hardest decision of his life: continue fighting until every defender was killed, or save the lives of the men who had fought so bravely for months. Finally, after one of the longest and fiercest sieges of the age, negotiations began. The defenders had earned the respect of their enemies. Even Sultan Suleiman admired their courage and determination. Instead of destroying the city or massacring its defenders, he offered honorable terms. The Knights of Rhodes would be allowed to leave the island with their weapons, their banners, and their honor intact. The Ottomans captured Rhodes, but they never broke the spirit of the men who defended it. Their courage became legendary across Europe. For centuries, soldiers studied their stand, not because they had won the siege, but because they had refused to surrender until every possible option had been exhausted. Today, the Siege of Rhodes is remembered as one of history's greatest last stands, a story of courage, sacrifice, endurance, and unwavering determination against impossible odds. It proved that sometimes true victory is not measured by who holds the battlefield, but by the courage shown while defending it.